Since we didn't have any money on the first film, I just sort of got a bunch of magazines on military technology and studied what it looked like and then created my own designs. So on the second picture, a lot of the design of the machines, the future machines, the Terminator endoskeleton and all that sort of thing was already done.
Jim had done a couple of sketches for the first movie. Just Terminator 2 had an A budget. And that included coming up with original devices and machines, weapons that, while being original, were sort of like cut from the same cloth.
The thing that remained to be created was the T-1000. What I did was brought in a few artists that I'd worked with in the past and had them just kind of hypothesize what a liquid chrome figure would look like in various configurations.
Some of the biggest changes occurred very early where, you know, was it going to be monstrous? And there were some sketches like that where it had these ridges and it looked very demonic, but Jim wanted it more to go into the direction of just this very amorphous, very simple human form, which is what you see, you know, when he walks out of the fire. It's a very simple representation of a man.
The storyboard guy, or the visual effects artist, basically spends more time thinking about a particular visualization of a scene than the writer, director has time to. In reading the script, I would break it down to visualize what it would be, to come up with the best angle for the effect. I usually try to do 3 or 4 different ways once I've done what's in the script. The approach that Jim takes is, what is the best way this is going to work for me? And that eventually is the way you end up doing it.
Because Jim has done so many action movies, he's very aware of the physical difficulties that will come up in numerous roles. And I think a strong consideration is always, will this actor be willing to do this, or can he do this? People might think that you don't need strong actors in an action picture because of all of the special effects. A Jim Cameron movie does have all of those special effects, but still is a character-driven piece and has wonderful characters. You've got to have good actors as they're playing against all the special effects. That's what distinguishes his action movies from other people's action movies. I remember that Jim said to me very early on, John Connor is an extremely important role, and I have got to have a young actor who is a professional who will hit his marks. I cannot be working with a new kid. I can't do it. And one of the problems is that this is supposed to be a streetwise kid, and a kid who was a bit tough, and we saw all of these professional kids who couldn't have any toughness, and when they tried to act angry or tough, it just looked ridiculous. It didn't look real, it didn't look believable.
What I was looking for is a combination of a kind of a strength of character that wasn't necessarily a physical strength. I didn't want him to be just some little jock kid that looked like he could handle anything. He had to have a quality that needed protecting.
This was in the summertime, and one thing that I ended up doing was going to camps, motocross races, and then we decided we would start looking, in addition to theaters, at some kinds of organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs. And it was at that point that we contacted the Boys Club in Pasadena. And then I started walking around, and there was a kid leaning up against the wall by the pool.
This woman started staring at me, and I thought she was so weird because she just stared at me and smiled at me, and I'm just like, yeah.
And I walked over to him, and he was snarling at me. And I said, you want to audition for a movie?
A couple days later, we get a call. Remember that woman you talked to in the Pasadena Boys Club? And I'm like, yeah. And then she's, well, that's the casting director for Terminator 2. They want you to go up for the part of John Connor. And I'm just like, yeah. I went in for my first interview. Then I get a call later, and Mally Finn says, I want you to come out and try out with Linda Hamilton. So I went and tried out for it again and got really bashful and kind of shy, and I didn't do so well, and I almost got written off the list.
It was exactly what Jim was afraid of, that he couldn't repeat things right away. It was terribly difficult. He was very nervous.
Mally kept fighting for me, and she said, just give him one more chance. And I got an acting coach.
We found this wonderful man, Mike Muscat, who came in and worked with Eddie for a while, and we brought him back. He came in and did the scenes again.
I went in for my final interview, and I was really nervous. I looked around, and Jim's just like, you know, I could just see the look on people's faces. And then I just kind of just brightened up and did the part, and Jim lifted his head from his hands, and I left. And then right when I was getting in the car, Jim came out and he said, you have the part.
At one of the first casting sessions, Jim said, we have to cast the T-1000 immediately because of the morphing and the process is time-consuming, and so we have to find someone right away.
Well, I wanted to find someone who would be a good contrast to Arnold, and I wanted somebody who won through different means, who was extremely fast, agile, quick.
He said the man should almost have a dancer's body. Not like a gymnast, that's too muscular, but someone who is very powerful, lean, and lithe. He should look like he isn't a physical contest with Arnold. It's a different kind of power.
I think I was lucky that Jim, from what I understand, wanted an unknown for it, so that there wasn't any preconceived idea or you know, something that they could recognize me from. And then when I went in there, I was just sort of tipped off that I was supposed to create some sort of an intense presence. And I started playing around with that with Mally, and there was something she saw, and she said, whatever that is, you know, whatever you're doing right now, why don't you keep that going, and we'll get it on tape.
It's almost like it's about senses with him. You know, you feel that he's very in touch with the world and analyzing it and observing it. And that's very much what the T-1000 is about, because he's a perfect chameleon.
T2 was one of the first, it was the only script I've ever read where I literally did not know how to do something. Some of the things that were described were things that no one had ever done on screen before. And that's when you start to figure out just how strong you are as a producer, because you obviously, you can't panic. You have to say, okay, let's approach this rationally. The effects schedule basically drove the entire production schedule. Sometimes we were shooting things not just out of order, which you always do in a film, but so completely out of order that you might be shooting the first part of one scene, you know, 2 months or 3 months apart.